Hey guys, today I'm making a sheath for this knife that I recently refinished all the fittings on. Got them looking up to my standards better. So I'm gonna start with a folder. I'm gonna draw out a shape so I can start cutting leather out. Gotta have a good pattern to go by. And be careful not to scratch the 24 karat gold on the knife here. We're gonna do a right hand carry. Just start tracing out the blade once you get her centered and some of the guard. That should do good there to get us started. Here's the progress on the sheath so far. I've got 3 pieces in here. We've got a thin layer of leather in the middle, then I glued some lambskin to this side so the blade will have something real nice to slide against. And then on the outside, it's covered in shark skin, which normally I do some tooling and stuff on my sheaths, but this time I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do one that's completely covered in exotic materials. So the front and back will have shark skin, and then on the tip and throat area, by throat, I mean like up here, and then like this is the tip area. Those areas are gonna have some of this beautiful elephant skin right up here. So right now I've got these, got contact cement on a couple pieces right here, and that needs to dry for a couple minutes, and then I can put that on there. I'm trying to cut out the front piece right now. That'll go on, well, I don't know where it went, but this will go on the front piece if I can find it. So guys, I have a little secret to admit. I absolutely detest doing leather work. I feel like I'm okay at it. Okay slash maybe good-ish, depending on who you are. But I really don't enjoy doing it most of the time. But I really enjoy the finished product of having a knife and sheath together. So in that aspect, I like it because I like having the sole authorship package. When the sheath is done, I'm like, yeah, I really like that. But while I'm doing it, it's like, I don't know. So we've got contact cement on here and here. You put it on there and you let it dry for a few minutes, and then you stick the pieces together, and the contact cement sticks to itself really well, and it's really flexible for leather and glues the pieces really, really well. If both pieces have a nice coarse texture for the cement to glue onto, if it's done just right on coarse surfaces, the cement will hold and be stronger than the leather, to where if you ripped it apart, the leather would actually rip apart before the cement. Now, of course, this is kind of a smooth surface here. It won't stick that good to that, but we're gonna get all this stitched up after it's put together too. I think I'll start at this end. This is the thickest leather I have. I'll probably have to build it up a little thicker though with some thin pieces. Or maybe another thick piece right here so it'll be the right thickness of the blade. Because you can see right here, the blade's thicker than what I have. So you want to build that up so it fits in there nice. Not too tight, not too loose. Oh, oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. Gotta be careful where you set it. Hopefully I got this the right length. Otherwise we might be in trouble. I've got some contact cement on the end of the piece there and on the edge of the other one so they stick to each other as well. You can just cut out one big chunk and then cut the middle out and put it on there, but it wastes a lot of leather, so I like to put a seam here, just have it be 2 pieces, and when it's all done and burnished and everything, you can't even hardly see a seam at all. So now, to really help it stick, you lightly tap it with a hammer, and it really just bonds it together. I guess it's the contact part of the contact cement. There we go. So I just got done ripping the liner off of, I had the liner on this piece, and I had the this glued on. I forget what it's called. Welt? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, so I ripped the liner off. It was really squishy, like it was just some poor quality leather down here or something. Or maybe I was too close to the edge of it and it was just squishy. And I was worried the tip of the blade would get stuck in it as it's going down and rip it all up. So I tore the lining out of this piece and the other piece. I already replaced it on this piece with another thin cowhide liner. So you can see how it's nice and stiff, so the tip shouldn't get stuck in it at all. I'm getting ready to replace it on here, and then I can glue this piece back on. Josh, are you still sick? You been sneezing in this jar again? I am looking for a good piece of shark skin to put on the front of the sheath. One piece I had over there got some little rough spots in it, and the other piece is really, really nice for a really long piece. I don't need it to be that long, but I can use it. I was just looking through my stuff.
How much money do you think you got in there?
Not much. This exotic material is not too expensive, and they're little scrap pieces left over from like bigger projects. I think the other Springfield Leather Company does. I like to hoard fine materials, and it really hurts me sometimes to use nice things because then I won't have it in my stash anymore. So that's the only thing I'm coming against right now. And I don't want to waste stuff. Like if I use this, I won't be able to get a nice sized chunk out of it anywhere else. So this one little chunk that I need is gonna basically use up this whole thing. I want it to fit in there nice. So I want the spine to stick up over the welt just a tiny little bit so it'll fit in snug. And I think it's there. Just want to make sure I don't need to add or take away layers right here. I think we're good. That fits good. I'm checking to see if it fits good here. I need to check and see if it fits good on this side too. Maybe do a little stretching. Stretch!
What's your favorite thing about making a sheath?
Part when it's done and I'm not making a sheath anymore.
All right, we'll go back to some time lapse.
Bye. Okay, so ran into about 3 or 4 problems. First of all, this is my 3rd time gluing this together and taking it apart. As you can see, it's starting to kind of really look like a banana peel. The welt, I don't know. The welt is giving me more trouble than I ever normally get, and I keep having to thin it down because the blade fits in there too loose. I think I'm at the spot to where it'll fit in there nice and tight. Although after I stitch it up, it might be so tight that it's too tight because the stitching sometimes clamps everything together really tight. But I think it's there. And to compound the problem, I've had to put multiple coats of glue on because my glue is getting a little thick, so I put some of this thinner in it to thin it down, and I put too much in there. So now it's super watery, and I have to put like multiple coats on to get enough to make it stick good, and that's just making everything take longer. So if you saw in the time lapse me putting it together, taking it apart, putting it together, well, that's exactly what I was doing.
Back to time lapse.
Okay guys, so I just got done making a small groove in the leather, like that. And that'll let the string sit down flush in the leather. The stitching won't stick up above the leather. And I've also marked it out with this little stitch marker. And this just gives us a place to drill our holes for all the stitching. Kind of puts it in a nice even grid or distance from each other. So we're ready to go drill some holes and then we can stitch it together. All right, so now we've got all the holes drilled in here. I made that groove on the front like I talked about to let the stitching sit down below the surface of the leather. Now I need to come across the back, now that I know where the holes come out, and do it on the back side too. And then I'll also run over all these holes with the stitch marker one more time, and that'll kind of round all the holes out and kind of give the string a saddle to sit in. So one of the bonuses of hand stitching is that you can make the stitching on the back of the sheath almost look as good as the front. I'm gonna say within about 95% margin. Front always looks really good with a machine, but on the back, it just doesn't look quite as good as being done by hand. So that's why I like to do all my stitching by hand, so all the stitching looks just as good on the back pretty much as it does on the front. You just can't get it with a machine. It takes a lot of extra time and gives blisters on my fingers doing that, but it's worth it. It's also really solid construction that way. Done. All right, so the next thing is I've got some super high quality thread stitching stuff. I actually don't know what it's made out of, but it's wax treated and it's super strong. It's thicker than I like though, and I can't seem to find just the right thickness that I do like, so I go ahead and use this stuff. But in order to get it the right thickness, I actually take apart the strands. It looks like it's like 5 strands, so what I do is I take 2 of the strands off, and then I use 3 of the strands to sew up the sheath, and that gives me the right thickness that I like in the thread. Well, I gotta thread the needles and start saddle stitching it up.
Cool.
All right, Josh, I just got it all stitched up. Note to self for future reference, this shark skin is really nice, but is also a little extra soft in some areas, so I really didn't need to cut that groove in there like I showed before. I probably could have just laid the stitches out and then drilled holes. It's soft enough the string would have sat under the surface. But like this, because I cut those grooves in there, the string's so far down that it's almost lost. But I have one last little step. It's kind of like magic. I run over it with this stitch marker and it makes all the stitching just look really nice. And hopefully it'll make this stitching that sunk under the surface a little bit pop out a little bit and you'll be able to see it better. So let's run it over. I love doing this part because it just really makes the stitching look pretty. Oh yeah, it's making the stitching show up a little bit better there in that real soft area. Check that out. Isn't that pretty cool? Big difference. Ta-da! I think that feels like just the right amount of tension. It'll loosen up as the knife goes in and out a few more times. But yeah, all that work peeling the parts apart and putting them back together 3 times earlier paid off. It tightened up a little bit more after stitching and it's right where I like it, to where the knife won't fall out, so it doesn't require any kind of strap to hold it in, especially with a blade this big. This blade's like 14 inches or something. So it won't fall out, but yet it comes out easy enough to where you don't have to really pull and pull on it. I think you could probably be riding a horse with this under your belt, you know, and it's never gonna come out. We're getting near to the end of this project. The next thing I have to do is grind on the edge with my grinder over there. I'll use like a 120 grit belt, get it all uniform. And something else that really helps make your sheath look streamlined is instead of leaving all this square, you round it off. And the more you round it, the more streamlined and thin the sheath will look. They can look real clunky and boxy and like square if you leave this flat, so I like to round it quite a bit. So I'll do all that over on the belt grinder, and I'll also put a belt on a worn out like 320 grit belt and put lots of water on the edge, and we'll burnish all the edge with the belt sander in order to get it as smooth as possible. That'll get us really close to the finished smoothness, and then we'll also run over it with this piece of antler and maybe a steel rod or something later to get it really nice and smooth and get all those little fibers laying down. So, cut to time lapse. All right, guys. I've got the edge all shined up. I used a little piece of antler, some leather balm, got it nice and shiny. This is probably the shiniest edge I've ever done on a knife sheath, and it still needs finish coats of leather finish on it too. So I'm gonna let it dry overnight, and then we'll put a couple coats of leather finish on it. I'll spray some of this stuff on there with the airbrush, and it'll make the whole thing look nice and shiny and finished and protected. Getting ready to put the finish coat onto this leather sheath that's mostly done. Just needs a couple finish coats on it to give it a little shine, protect the leather, and we start spraying. This is the best way I've found to get a nice even coating on the sheath. I've used these in the past, but they leave like fuzz sticking all over your sheath, whereas if you spray it with this, it leaves it nice and fuzz-less. I'll probably end up doing 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 coats of this by the time we're done. It needs to dry for at least a few hours in between coats too. You want some nice thin coats. Lots of thin coats is better than like one thick coat, because a thick coat doesn't adhere to the leather as well or something, and almost you could like scrape it off with your thumb, but the thin coats really adhere. Stick my handle in there and then we can do the rest. Alright guys, if you liked the video, then hit that thumbs up and stick around for more content. If you want to see more, then subscribe. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye!